Welcome back to the Campfire Series podcast. I am your host, Logan Soforenko. We have a very special guest joining us today. We have he's a former member of the Something Rotten Broadway company, and he was on the first national tour as Nigel Bottom, and he played Nigel Bottom on Broadway, and he also directed one of the first licensed regional productions of Something Rotten over at Musical Theater West in Long Beach. Please welcome Josh Grisetti.
Hey there, I'm Josh Grisetti. I am primarily an actor, but I also dabble in a little directing. I was in New York for about 15 years or so, doing Broadway, off-Broadway, regional gigs, television out of New York, which is pretty great. And then eventually that all sort of culminated in I was doing Something Rotten on Broadway, and when it closed, I immediately jumped on board with the tour and traveled around the country for about a year and a half with that show, and then ended up on the West Coast here in Los Angeles, where I am now.
So let's rewind back to when Something Rotten was on Broadway at the St. James. How did it come? How did the replacement process go? Because obviously, I assume John was doing it for a long time. How did they find you, and what was the audition process like to replace John Cariani?
So this is actually kind of a fun story because Something Rotten premiered the same year that that another show premiered that I was in. So I think we opened alternating nights. So I think I can't remember who went first, but I was doing a show called It Should Have Been You that season, and we opened either the night before or the night after Something Rotten. So it was very much in sort of the 2015 season, which was really awesome because there were so many new shows, new works, shows that weren't necessarily based on other material, like not based on movies from the 90s, for example, but fully unique productions. That was a really great season. And so Something Rotten and It Should Have Been You were sort of side by side in that way. They were both completely unique, weren't based on anything, and seeing all this different work being materialized at the same time was pretty great. And I remember going to see it in previews on one of our off nights from It Should Have Been You. I went to see Something Rotten. So I'm not sure when it probably would have been right before it opened. And I remember standing up at intermission, and I knew John loosely. We had encountered each other in the business here or there, doing concerts and that kind of thing, and I had some other friends in the cast, and I remember standing up at intermission and telling the person I was with, I was like, I hope this runs long enough so that I can replace John, because this role is so good and so great for our our type, the tall, lanky, sort of naively nerdy character man. So it kind of began there. Flash forward to, and I thought John was brilliant. It's one of the things I walked away thinking was, I hope I can replace him because this is such a great role, but also no one will be able to replace John Cariani in this because he is so brilliant. His performance in those early days was so powerful because he was so naive and so subtle in what he was bringing, but also so big and bold in the way that the show is written. It was just such a great combination. And anyway, cut to a little over a year later, maybe. Something Rotten outlived It Should Have Been You, so it was still running after It Should Have Been You closed. I had gone off to Japan to do the out-of-town tryout for Prince of Broadway, which was Hal Prince's show, which was trying to come to New York at the time. And I came back, and I was about to go start a little regional job up at the Long Wharf Theater, and I ran into John, who was still doing Something Rotten, and we were doing a concert at 54 Below together, doing a duet. And I was asking him, I was like, "How long are you going to stay in the show? Because if you ever leave, I want to crack it." And he's like, "Oh, I've already announced that they already know I'm leaving, and they're auditioning people now to replace me." And I was like, what? How is this happening, and why have I not been told? He was like, you should tell your agents to call them, because I know that they're starting auditions soon. So I literally walked out of a rehearsal for the concert and called my agent and said, I just talked to John. He said he's leaving the show, and that they're seeing people. So why am I not being seen? And I literally had an appointment scheduled, maybe 2 days later. So the only reason I was involved at all was because of John. And then so the audition process itself, they called me, and I had worked with almost everybody on the creative team except for the writers before. So I knew Casey, I knew Phil Reno, who was the music director, I knew Kevin McCollum, who was the producer, just from different projects over the years. So it was a very familiar room walking in. It was a nice atmosphere. It was really friendly, which is really helpful for material like this. And I ran through the material once. I walked out. We had a few laughs, and then I got a call maybe the next day from my agent saying, so it's not official, but it's very likely that they're going with you. They just have to clear some red tape on their end to make sure everybody signs off before they make an official offer, but nobody else is currently in the running. Like, they're just looking at you. So just hang tight. And it was probably another 2 or 3 days after that I got an actual offer with the contract. And at the time, the tour was not, no one was aware of the tour outside of the production end. And so I was only contracted to do the Broadway thing. And I came in, and we had a good time. It was me and Rob McClure and Leslie Kritzer and Will Chase as Shakespeare. We all kind of came in at the same time. And a few months later, Will was only there for a few months. Contractually, that was planned, and Adam Pascal came in after that. But Adam came in for the last 3 months of Broadway, knowing that he was also going to do the tour. It was part of his deal. That was not the case for the rest of us, me and Rob particularly, and even that was sort of a fluke, because we weren't supposed to do the tour, and we they were auditioning people for the tour, and we knew that was going on. And I saw the associate director, Steve Bebout, in the theater one night. I said, "Hey, how are tour auditions going?" And he said, "Not great." He's like, "You sure you wouldn't want to do the tour?" And he was kind of like half kidding. And I was like, "Well, I mean, if we worked out a deal, I don't know, I wouldn't be opposed to doing the tour." And he was like, "Really? Like, without anybody else, like just you and Adam? That wouldn't be weird?" I was like, I don't think so. But I was like, "Are you positive Rob wouldn't want to do the tour?" He's like, "Well, we don't think he would. He hasn't said anything about it." So I was like, "Okay, well, we should all talk about it." I literally walked away from Steve, went straight to Rob's dressing room, and I said, "Rob, would you have any interest in doing the tour?" And he said, "I don't know. Not unless Maggie, his wife." He's like, "Not unless Maggie was involved somehow." And I was like, "Well, I mean, Maggie they met on a tour. They did, I think, maybe even 2 tours together before Something Rotten. I can't remember. I mean, at least one. They were doing Avenue Q together. So, like, Maggie is an established, vetted performer. You should pitch that to them." And Rob said, "I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be like, I'll do it if my wife comes." He just didn't want to do that. And I was like, I totally get that. So I left the room, and I went back to Steve, and I said, "Steve, Rob would consider doing the tour if Maggie was involved too. You know that, right?" And he was like, and of course he didn't know that. He was like, "Are you serious? That would be a thing?" I was like, "Yeah, but he just doesn't want to be the guy who demands that, so it's going to have to be your idea." So apparently the next day, what's his name? Kevin McCollum called Rob and said, "I've got this great idea. Hear me out. I know it's crazy. What if Maggie was on the tour with you playing your wife? Like, would you be interested?" And of course he was like, "Yes." And then they auditioned Maggie. They didn't just give it to her. They needed to make sure she could sing it, and she could. She sang the hell out of it. So and she was great, and that was how it happened. That was the history of it. So we went on tour together for a year and a half. Me, Adam, Rob, and Maggie, and Leah Hoffman, who was in the ensemble. She was the only ensemble member to make the jump to the tour.
When you stepped into the part for the first time and you actually got to, get invested into breaking down the script and doing this awesome show, what was your reactions when you went on stage and you were telling this awesome story, when it comes to it being so uniquely written? Because there's no show like Something Rotten with the jokes and the way that everything is just delivered. What was your reaction as a performer?
I mean, it's weird because I've never done a show as long as I worked on Something Rotten. I did that show for 2 years, and there's not a lot of other shows I can think of where I could have done the show that long. And granted, there are people in the industry who have, been working on Phantom of the Opera for 15 years or 20 years or whatever. I mean, there are people who can do it, but my brain just doesn't do well being stagnant for too long. So, but the fact that I could sit in Something Rotten for so long, I think, is a testament to the writing. It is so much fun to do. Partly because it's just the writing is good for the part of the actors. Like you get to have a lot of great dialogue that flows really nicely and gets a lot of great laughs, and the moments are really sweet. And but also because the audience always, if they're theater lovers, they always just love the show. And there's something about walking out of the theater at the end of the night knowing that so many people had such a great time, and that you made somebody's day brighter, for 2.5 hours. There's something about that that's really special. So that, I'd say, is the most memorable thing, that sticks with me about that whole experience. But also Nigel himself, I think that's the role that I played, has the best character arc of the whole show. His point A to point B is so good. He starts as this sort of nebbish little character in the shadow of his brother, and over the course of the show, sort of blossoms as a character. He falls in love with someone falls in love with him, which he kind of probably thought never was going to happen in his life. It reinvigorates his passion for writing to the point that he can stand up for himself and for his craft, to his own brother, who is sort of his hero, and Shakespeare, who is also his hero. Like, to be able to grow that much as a character is pretty great to play. So I'd say all of the above there is what made it such a good experience.
What was your favorite number to do? It's just a Something Rotten thing. What was your favorite number?
I mean, the favorite number, honestly, was the favorite number in the show is one that I was not in, but that's musical. It's just such a good number. I mean, it's the Tony Award number. I don't even know if it was on the Tony Awards. I assume it was, but it should have been if it wasn't. It would get a standing ovation in the middle of the first act. Like, that is so rare. That does not happen in theater very often, so that's a pretty special moment. But I got to watch that number off stage because I made the next entrance after that that number, so I just got to sit back and watch. Being in, oddly, my favorite thing to perform was the very, sort of toward the end of the show, the climax of the show. It's a song called To Thine Own Self Be True, and in the Broadway version, it's not true. Oh yeah, it is true. This was never actually on Broadway, but the Broadway version was completely different than the tour version. They rewrote it for the tour, and it's the tour version that I'm talking about, because the rewrite for the tour was so good. It has this beautiful a cappella section with all of the male ensemble, plus Nigel, and it's just 30 seconds of just this pure, beautiful sound that you don't hear any other, at any other point in the night, with that show. And so it makes it very special. But it's also the pinnacle of Nigel, character-wise, like coming to, stand on his own 2 feet and make a case for himself and stand up to his brother. But it's all infused with such sort of love and passion. It's just really great. It's just a great moment. It was a great moment to play. It was a great moment to sing. It sounds really beautiful. It was fun to sing. So that was my favorite part. But unfortunately, if you didn't see the tour, that song is not on the cast album, so you really don't even know what I'm talking about. But we are working on a video, actually. All of we got back together, all of the ensemble from the tour with the composers to put together a sort of 30-second video of us singing just that harmony section, because it doesn't exist anywhere now. No one can find it. But if you license the show, you said you did it, right?
We did that. We did that a cappella version as well.
Yeah, so if you license the show, you will get that music. But especially for high schools and stuff, they don't have any reference point to know what that sounds like. They have to learn it all cold with their piano teacher and whatever. So one of the reasons why I asked the writers, I was like, could we record this? Was kind of for posterity, for the sake that a lot of people, specifically kids who are going to do this show at their schools, they're not going to have anything to learn off of. They're not going to have a cast album recording to listen to. So I love that we're going to produce that just so that people can hear it, and it'll be out there on the internet. So keep an eye out for that. That's probably coming in the weeks ahead. And it's totally random. It's like a COVID-19 treat, since we're all sitting at home anyway. We might as well do something.
I like that. But you obviously, everyone wants to be on Broadway. The price that comes with it is you're performing 8 times a week. What are some tactics that you used to stay not only just physically strong but mentally strong as well when you were in New York at the same theater 8 times a week, but then also when you went on tour when you were shuffling theaters every couple weeks, and what was the same and what was different?
I mean, the 8 shows a week phenomenon is sort of the same whether you're at a regional theater, on tour, on Broadway, whatever. It's the same. Like you have to have the same level of consciousness about like what your sleeping habits are, what your eating habits are, how much you're staying in shape, the sacrifices you're going to make personally in terms of you don't really get time off. You're not available nights and weekends. You're not available on holidays because you are part of a leisure industry. So when everybody else is off of work, that's when they want to go see theater. So that's the time you have to be at work, which is fine, but it makes it hard long term if you're doing that for years. If you build a career doing that, you're going to make sacrifices with your family and your loved ones if they're not also involved in theater, that they may or may not understand, and that's the hardest part, I think, of all of it when you look at having a career in the theater. But all that is the same. That it gets harder on tour because now you're not in one place for your family to come visit, or if you have family in New York or whatever, they're not all there. If you have a partner who is not on the tour with you, that is super tough because now you got to schedule when you're going to see each other. That's just very hard. So I guess tour is. I look back on tour, I think that is the hardest version of living life. You know what I mean? It's easiest in the sense that you always have a place to be. You always know what your schedule is, but and you can map it out in advance. A tour is booked for a year in advance or whatever it is, so you know what the math is on it. Whereas a Broadway show could close at any moment. If you're looking at the box office numbers, at any moment the producer may say, we got to pull the plug, we're not making enough, whatever. So there is sort of a security in a tour that you don't necessarily have in New York, unless you're in one of the government shows, as we call them, which are the ones that aren't going anywhere, like The Lion King, Phantom of the Opera, now Hamilton or whatever, like shows that are just they're going to be selling tickets for many years. Unless you're in one of those, everybody else is sort of on the edge of their seats all the time, so that's nerve-wracking. And then of course you're dealing with things that you don't deal with in New York on tour, like what the altitude is of where you're at, what the humidity level is. There's a huge difference singing in the Northeast versus singing in the Southwest. And if you're not prepared for that, and you're not, bringing humidifiers and adjusting your water intake and all that stuff, it gets very sort of technical and sciencey, but that stuff can really mess with you on tour. So, it's just an added level of stuff. But I don't know, it's all part of the game. You learn the ropes, and then you deal with it as it comes.
when it comes to kind of segueing into your most recent, I guess, directorial production of Something Rotten, which was this past fall at Musical Theater West, really wanted to go see it. But with school, I'm in San Fernando Valley, so a little far, but I wanted to come see it because the Nick Bottom. I wanted to see Eric do it so bad. But how did you get involved in that? How did they How did you get involved into directing this awesome show? And it was one of the, I guess, first like couple of regional shows of Something Rotten.
Yeah, I mean, the Musical Theater West production was the first licensed show to do it, so they were slated to be the first, the regional premiere. But then Fireside Theater, I think in Illinois or something, also got the rights, but their production was a couple weeks before, so they technically got ahead of it. But that's a theater in the round, which, not that it's not a production, it is, but you basically strip out all the sets. I mean, there is no set in the theater in the round. You paint the floor whatever color you want. I feel like the first fully realized production of Something Rotten on regionally was our production of it at Musical Theater West. So I'm going to steal the thunder of Fireside with that. But the way it happened is pretty like all things. There's a bit of networking involved. I have friends in LA, in the LA theater scene, and a couple of them sort of, when they knew I was moving to LA after the tour, they said, well, they've already announced that this regional theater out here is going to be doing Something Rotten. You should direct it if you're interested in that. And these are friends who know me, and so they know I'm interested in that. So so I was like, well, if you make a connection there, I don't know these people at all. So if you introduce me to them, I'm happy to do it. So I went to see the production they were working on at the time, which was Oliver. and I met the artistic director and introduced myself. We had one of those friends was there, so they introduced us really. And we sat and talked for about 10 minutes or so about Something Rotten and my involvement over the years with it. And how he's like, so they say you're interested in directing. I was like, yeah. He's like, well, honestly, we haven't even gotten the script yet. Because the official script hasn't been formalized yet by MTI, the licensing agency, so they can't send us an official copy. So we don't really even know what we're up against yet as far as design plans and whatever. And I was like, I can at least, whether I direct the show for you or not, I can at least take care of that. So I reached out to the writers and I said, hey, can I give a copy of the script to this company that's already licensed to do it? They just haven't gotten the script yet. And they said, sure, send them the tour script and just know that there may be a couple adjustments. So I did. I sent them that script and let them get a head start on it. And I think from there, I kind of pitched my ideas briefly that night, saying, here's kind of what I think ballpark-wise I would want to do with it, and the changes that I think we could make to make it a little easier to produce at a regional theater level. There's a lot of locations in that show, and a lot of big sets, and I found ways to kind of pull that back a little bit. Probably not as much as they would have liked. They would have liked a very cheap production, but ultimately it is a spectacle. That show has to have a little pizzazz to it, otherwise it doesn't really work. So whatever, we talked about all of that, and a month or two later they, offered me an official, job, and then we were off and running. So that was it in a nutshell.
When it came to actually directing it, with Nigel, having played him for a long period of time, what was that relationship that you had with your Nigel Bottom like as a director rather than being like a castmate?
Yeah, I knew going in that Nigel would be the hardest role for me to direct because I had spent so much time with him, and over 2 years of playing him. As an actor, one of the ways you keep it fresh for yourself is that you're constantly exploring alternative tactics and ideas behind why he's saying, the things he's saying and what's motivating all that. So I knew that whatever the actor came in with, I would have probably, at least intellectually, if not physically, have already explored all of those options. And it was hard to not get ahead of that and be like, I already know this is not going to work because I've tried that and here's where you're going to run into a wall with that line of thinking. But instead, I tried very hard to rein myself in and really let the actor explore it at his own pace and figure it out as he needed to, without telling him like that I knew he was going to hit a stumbling block here and there. And we found a good sort of rhythm to make that possible. And you have to accept, it's one of the things of any actor who is going to transfer into directing. You have to accept that every actor brings something new to the role, and if you try to direct every person to sort of act the way that your instincts act, you're going to stifle everybody. You're going to micromanage everybody's performance, and none of it's going to work. So some of it is like, there are moments where I would sit back and go, I don't know, I could not make this choice work, but they're somehow making it kind of work. So I'm going to let them have the freedom to keep exploring that choice, rather than trying to, put out a light. If an actor has an instinct, I think the priority of the director is to fan the flames of that instinct rather than replace it with your own. So part of it was just figuring that out. But he was really it was a great young guy named Bo Bryans, and he was really great. His progress from the first day of rehearsal to the last performance was actually really exciting to watch. And he was the only non-equity principal. I think this is correct. I think he was the only non-equity principal cast member. So he was standing up next to the guy playing his brother was Eric Peterson, who Eric is a Broadway vet, like a seasoned Broadway vet, has had multiple series regular roles on major television shows. Like, Eric is a serious performer. Like, and Bo is, this young guy who doesn't have many credits and was not even in the union. And to put them side by side, I think it was really exciting for Bo. But it was also exciting to watch, just knowing that this was an integral moment in somebody's, career, and in their growth as a young artist. So there's a lot of great stuff that came from it. But there was a lot of letting go of my former, Nigel incarnations. And John Cariani's. You have to let it all go and let somebody create it anew.
Well, just before we wrap up, I wish I could talk to you for hours. I really appreciate all the stuff you're giving me. But what's some advice you can give to young aspiring performers that are, in high school and college, and especially in times like these where, the whole audition process is going to change like crazy once theater really gets up and running again, a lot less in-person stuff and a lot of self-tape. So what's some advice you can give to those kind of performers?
Well, first thing I want to say is that this road toward self-taping was well underway long before the pandemic came. So this was happening anyway. The last job I booked was a tour. I didn't end up taking the tour, and thank God, because the pandemic came and crushed it anyway. But the last job I booked was through a self-tape. Being in LA, auditioning for theater stuff, I'm more likely going to be more on tape than I used to be anyway. But it's so common. It was so common a year ago, even, that I hope people aren't looking at this and thinking, oh, this whole self-tape thing happened because of COVID-19. It really didn't. COVID just put wind in the sails and shoved it farther along faster than it may have gone otherwise. But I actually think there's a lot of great things about it. I am much more relaxed on a self-tape than I am going in the room live, as anybody probably is, because like film and television, like filming something on set, you can be more relaxed because you can make a mistake and go back and fix it. You can't do that live. Granted, part of performing live is that you've got to be ready to roll with the punches, and because you're not going to be able to push pause and reset, when you're doing the actual show. So I do understand the argument that you don't want to rely too heavily on camera technique to audition with. But at the same time, people are never in a live audition. They are never quite the same as they are in the rehearsal room or even in performance. Auditioning is a separate beast because you have nerves and stakes and agendas at play that are not there when you've already got the job and no one's dissecting every breath I take here. Like, we're all working towards this thing. And actually, talking about that phenomenon, how auditions are inherently different, is probably the best advice I could give people. Is to stop thinking of them as different. And so rather than going in and thinking, oh, I got to book this job and I got to convince the people on the other side of the table that I'm talented and I'm the best person for this job. Stop looking at it like that, because that doesn't help you. It just locks you up and makes you more tense and nervous and all that stuff. A better way to look at it is to just assume, walking into that room, I already have this job. This is just a rehearsal day like any other day. Put it in that context. It's a mind game, but we're actors. We're good at mind games. Like, we're good at imaginative thinking. But if you think of it that way, you're going to be more relaxed. And when someone gives you a note in the room, you're not going to go, oh my God, they must have hated what I just did. That's why they gave me this note. You're going to go, oh, we're all working toward the same thing, which is to make this performance the best it can be. Great. I'm going to take that note and roll with it and just explore it. It doesn't have to work or not work. Just try it. Just explore and play. If you can get into that mentality, even as early as the audition phase, I think you're just going to be much better off as a performer. You're going to make people lean in and be interested in working with you. Stop trying to make it perfect and, do it just the precious perfect way you rehearsed it in your bathroom or whatever. Let go of all that and just live in the present moment. I think you're going to hear that from every acting teacher ever. But rather than just blow that off and be like, oh, I've already heard that, keep meditating on it, because you always lose sight of it. So even I speak that for myself. I lose sight of that. I get wound up on auditions and stuff, and I have to keep coming back to these words and be like, oh, right, I need to do that. I need to relax and just rehearse and be cool.
Well, I really appreciate that advice. I think it's going to stick with a lot of people. What was, if you're allowed to say, what was the tour you booked?
I guess I'm allowed to say it. It was it was another John Cariani role. It was Band's Visit.
Nice.
To play Itzig, I think is the character's name. This was a while ago now. And for a lot of reasons, we just couldn't figure out how to negotiate that. I'm married now. Like, I'm not eager to go on tour at the moment. So we kind of had to draw a line in the sand, negotiating wise. But it ended up working out, because I think I would, had I taken that job, I would have started rehearsals like at the end of February. Would not have been great.
No,
I have no idea what the state of that particular tour is now, or if they're even planning to come back or not. I don't know. But I had a lot of things cooking here in LA at the time too that I didn't want to really give up or stop working on. So, so it was what needed to happen. But I love that show, and it's such a unique show. So I would have enjoyed working on it. I only would have done, I think, 6 months or something. So it wouldn't have been a long road. But that was the tour.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on and just take some time out of your day to talk to me about all these things. Like, I really appreciate that from the bottom of my heart. But with that being said,
happy to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. With that being said, unfortunately, we didn't get to do the show, but we made it pretty deep in the rehearsal process before COVID shut it down, which was good. We still had so much fun doing it. But yeah, it is tough.
I wish you had gotten to experience an audience with that show, because the magic that show has on audiences is pretty incredible, and for the cast to experience that sort of interaction with a room full of people is pretty exciting. Is one of the things. The cast, first of all, the cast of the tour of Something Rotten still has a text chain that we still talk to each other. Every few days somebody chats about something. And the cast that we put together at Long Beach, that show, that was a year ago now. Was it a year? Almost a year? I don't know. But it was a while ago now, and they still have a text chain. That's not the case with every show you ever do. Like, there's something about that show that brings people together. People have such a positive experience with it, that it creates a little, family unit when you go through it together. And I think a lot of that is that interaction with the audience. So I wish that you guys had that. Are you going to come back to it?
We
Or
are
is that kinda
we
lost
unfortunately are not, because I'm a senior, so a lot of the seniors are graduating. A lot of our
Oh,
principals
right.
were seniors, and also I think that if we were to come back, I think the whole Black Death song might have been just a bit edgy at times like this. But
Yeah, well, there's also what's that coming up the Silk Road out of China? The
yep.
Black Death. Yeah, it probably would have been a little spooky at the moment. But the same thing happened with, there's a line in the show, if you rehearsed it, you'll know, where they're talking about the plot of The Sound of Music, and he says, the main character, runs and hides from the Nazis.
Yep.
And then Nick says, the Nazis, are these good guys or bad? And Nostradamus says, I'm not sure, but it feels important that we should get that one right, or something like that. And that line has been in there the whole time. But when that huge fiasco happened in Charlottesville, which that was still in the early days of the tour, I think, so it would have been 2 or 3 years ago now, where there were sort of neo-Nazis coming back, and how the president said, well, there's good people on both sides. People thought, when we got to that line, I'm not sure if the Nazis are good or bad, but it seems important that we get that right. People thought that we added that to make like a political statement of the time, but it had been there for 2 years or more,
right?
Since the original show premiered. But it stopped the show. Like just the audience applauded for that line. I mean, it went on for 30 seconds. It was an intense moment, but it's so funny how the material hasn't changed, but just the circumstances change, and suddenly the material seems to comment on society in a way that it was never intended to, but people see what they see. So it's a cool sort of sociological experiment to see how that transmutes over time. But anyway, you're probably right about that. Should give something rotten a break until at least we've got a strong vaccine out and about.
Absolutely. But also, I'll tell Eric you say hi, because I'm having him on next week. So.
Oh, awesome! He's a great man, and an incredible talent. We were so and he was a last minute sort of replacement for. I had no idea he lived in Los Angeles. I thought he was in New York. So I didn't even think to reach out to him casting wise. But we had another actor who was scheduled to do it, who booked a TV thing last minute, and 2 weeks before we started rehearsals, he pulled out. So we had to go scrambling, and luckily Eric heard that we were in trouble, and he reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I heard that you need somebody to play Nick Bottom. I've actually always wanted to play that part." And I was like, "Oh my God, if you're available and in LA, without question, he's brilliant." So I was really excited to work with him, and he's such a good guy. And so yeah, send him all my regards.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Lots of good stuff, I think. Cool. We're all trying to stay positive, and this is a fun little project I've been doing, and I appreciate you contributing to that.
Awesome. Happy to contribute, and I hope it continues to go well and is a fruitful thing for you. Podcasts forever.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, buddy.
Well, it was nice meeting you as well. I'll let you know when the episode drops.